are the people that are participating in hookup culture that don't end up in relationships. They're probably having less children. So their morals are not going to be passed down to the next generation. It's going to be like a natural selection. They'll be weeded out. Whereas the families, the ones that have a family unit, family structure, they're going to pass down those morals. And whether or not they ever participated as parents themselves in hookup culture, that's debatable. But I think either way, if they participated, they can probably look back and say, that did not help me. That did not help my mental state. It was not good for me. I'm going to teach my children to do different than me and do better than me, because we see that in many aspects of life. And then I think that for the parents that never participated, obviously, there's probably some morals that they have that they would also pass down.
All right, so let's do a quick introduction. We got Emily and Todd. I was on their channel before. They're good people. I think we're going to have an interesting discussion/debate. Do you guys want to give a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, looking forward to our discussion, Alex. Thanks for having us on. I'm Emily King. I primarily started on TikTok not too long ago. I have 2.8 million followers, pretty much give dating and relationship advice. And then I'm a co-host with Todd with the Emily and Todd podcast, which is accessible on YouTube. So if you just @ the Emily and Todd podcast, you can find us. We pretty much talk about dating advice, a little touch of relationship advice too, I'd say. Mm-hmm. But our focus is really on giving solutions to guys in the dating world right now.
Cool. All right. So I want to start off with this. So Emily, is this a correct assessment? You kind of started off blue pill, but then you became like more black pillish. Is that correct? Or
I would say that my opinions on the importance of looks has changed just based on me knowing the details and the facts of like how people are meeting these days, which is primarily through dating apps. So I do think that like looks play a much larger role in dating apps.
How have your like views changed since you started your channel to now? Besides the looks part playing more of a role.
Besides that, I mean, I would say that I have a greater understanding of some of men's struggles, for sure. Uh-huh. And, I didn't realize that, like, such a large group of young men are struggling, especially in their 20s. I kind of had the assumption that the 20s was, like, prime time, but that's really just, it holds true for women quite a bit. And younger women are typically looking for men that are a little bit more mature, not extremely, as far as age difference, but just a little bit older. So I think that guys that are like in their late 20s and early 30s, they don't struggle quite as much.
Okay. What percentage of the picture do you say when it comes to dating do you think is looks? What percentage do you think is game / charisma / personality / whatever you want to call it?
I think that depends on a lot. I think it depends on like where you're meeting.
Let's start off with just day-to-day life.
So, like cold approach? Kind of like just running into somebody?
Yeah.
Or running into somebody. Or Alex, are you talking about making a cold approach? Or are you talking about a warm environment? Can you be more specific?
Sure. Let's start off with cold approach. So when you see a girl at a bar, you go up to her in that type of situation.
Okay. So this is the other variables. I think it depends on the girl. So it depends on what they're looking for. And this is something I think would be interesting to talk about is kind of the woman's perspective versus a man's perspective when you're first meeting somebody. And I think that like a lot of guys, from what I understand, and tell me your opinion on this, but they kind of have like a yes-no bucket, I guess. When they first see a girl, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm interested in her. Let's find out more. Let's talk. Or it's just a complete no. Would you say that's true?
I would caveat that, though, with it depends on what you're looking for from a guy's perspective. Because if he's looking for a hookup, his standards are going to be a lot lower than if he's looking for a relationship.
I think his look standards will be the same, but his personality standards will be totally different.
I don't want. I disagree.
His look standard might be a little higher, like he might be, but they're not going to be drastically. Meaning, I don't think a guy's going to sleep with a girl he finds repulsive.
No, I'm not talking about repulsive. I'm talking about somebody that, like, for example, if she comes across as very, trashy, he would definitely have sex with her, But at the same time, even if she is, kind of at that base level attractiveness to him, it's not going to get her to the point of him saying, okay, I want to really learn about her so I can potentially get a relationship with her.
Okay. I see the schism. So yeah, so I would consider trashy to be not really looks, but more personality, right? Because a girl can control whether she's trashy or not. Like you can take a trashy girl and like 24 hours later, she can be not trashy based on her behavior, right? So I consider more of that like behavior rather than looks. I see how it can tie into both, but yeah, I would consider that more behavioral based. It comes from like how you were raised, your socioeconomic status, your style, your influences and whatnot, rather than just your genetics.
But don't you think? No, we're not talking about. I'm not talking about genetics right now. I'm more talking about behavior. So, for example, if a woman, has, a lot of, like hair extensions, eyelash extensions, a lot of tattoos, like a BBL, that type of thing. That's where a lot of guys might look at her and say, yeah, I'll bring her home, but I have no interest in a relationship with her. Does that make sense?
I think guys say that, but I see like I think most guys will still, guys will typically date like anything they find attractive. So all those BBL girls, they have like 2 or 3 boyfriends. Like guys will look.
I think it depends on the guy. If it's a more conservative type guy, I don't think he's who wants kind of more of a traditional woman. I don't think that would be interesting to him. But
okay, I'll tell you this. We did a Tinder experiment recently. I haven't like really published the full results. We took a photo of my mom who's like 55 and used FaceApp to make her older. We made her like 65, 70, right? Like an old grandma. And we set her age at like 36, right? Which is like obvious that's like BS, right? Mm. And then we had her, we had a bunch of guys in like their 20s and 30s match with her. She got 1,000 likes in 48 hours. Like I guarantee you some of those dudes were willing to wife up this like grandma. So I think that like guys like to LARP around that like, oh, I'm really picky when it comes to like personality and relationships. And small percentage of guys are actually legitimately in that category. But most guys will date that hot BBL girl, even if she looks really trashy. I think they may be in denial about it and they'll find ways to backwards rationalize it. Be like, well, I feel like I really got to know her and she's actually not that trashy. So that's kind of my opinion on that.
Okay. Well, I think probably because we live in, much different areas, there's a different experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm thinking like the area that we live in, honestly, like if a guy was walking around with a woman like that, like that's actually a very unique look for where we live. Like it would stand out. It would draw eyes. Also, if she was like dressed provocatively, I'd say. And let's admit that it's human, that with a certain look, there's going to be assumptions made, so he may not want to, be seen with her simply because of those assumptions, depending on the area that he lives in.
No, I agree. I bet there's like way less of BBL girls, let's call them, in like your area. Like I'm sure, but I bet you, if like we took like a bunch of BBL girls, like 20 of them, and imported them to your area, and they were all interested in a relationship, within a month they could all find boyfriends. Like there's definitely going to be a bunch of British guys, and like not like low life British guys, like kind of like higher up who work in finance. You're definitely going to date these BBL girls, but they might be like, again, they're going to find ways to backwards rationalize. They're going to be like, well, she wasn't what I was looking for, but the BBL culture is so fascinating. I don't know. That would be my speculation.
Yeah, maybe, but I think the reality, if it's a high quality guy, meaning when I say high quality, I mean somebody with a decently high IQ, who's emotionally stable, who has a good job, comes from a good family, things like that. Again, he might smash, but I doubt that he's probably going to relationship her up unless he's really, kind of in that category where that's his only option.
I think for a lot of guys, that is their only option. So like, okay, what percentage of guys do you think fall into this like high value guy category?
It depends. So I would, because that I kind of hate using those terms like high value, but essentially when I'm referring to high value or low value, it's really about, at the end of the day, and this is going to sound blue pilled, but kind of what type of person they are. From a guy's perspective, are they an honorable man? Are they somebody that's a hard worker? Are they stable? Do they not use drugs and alcohol excessively. Those type of things. Are they able to hold down a job? Do they have their money right? That type of thing. And so that's kind of what I would consider. Unfortunately, the reason that I fall more kind of on the black pill camp is not because I value good looks or looks at all. It's the fact that the reality is that in our current dating meta, that's how you get in the door, because of the fact that most people are meeting through some kind of either cold approach or online, because warm environments just really don't exist anymore. Not like they used to anyways.
Yeah, I look at high value very simply. It's, do you have abundance or scarcity? And in terms of guys, so I don't think your IQ or education really plays much of a role in that, and finance only plays somewhat of a role in it. Status does play a huge role, and looks does play a bit of a role. But really it comes down to, are you in a place where you're in abundance, where you can pick from a variety of girls, or are you in scarcity where you don't really have many options? And I would say that like something like 1% of men are actually in abundance. 1% of men would be like these high value guys who have a luxury of various girls they can choose from. 99% of men would not be in that category. They would be in scarcity, and they're gonna like date like the first decent girl that comes along, and like they will make all kinds of crazy exceptions that they will then backwards rationalize. But yeah, there is a small percentage of men who will be extremely picky because they have the luxury of being picky.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think it has to do like economics plays a role, right? Like we're all like civilized people, but like what if we get all what if there's like a zombie apocalypse or something like that, or the economy crashes? Within a few weeks, we're not going to be that civilized. We're going to be running around stealing from each other, like food and shit. Like, so all you have to do is like, I think economics plays a huge role, like abundance and scarcity. Now that we're all like, we have an abundance of like, comfort food, right? We act like very like sophisticated. It's like, oh, I will take the cream tartare scallops or whatever, right? But then go a few weeks without in scarcity, and your whole behavior will change and your mindset will change. I think like sexual economics works like that to some extent. That'll be my speculation.
Okay. Well, no, it's interesting, Alex, that you bring that up, because I mean, I wouldn't even say it's that high a percentage as far as if you're using those metrics, and that's actually sounds very black-pilled, because the reality is the guys who are going to have abundance in this current dating meta are the guys who are the best looking.
Yeah, so that's what would separate from being black pill is. I wouldn't say that it solely or primarily relies on looks. There's good looking guys who are not in that category, who are in scarcity because they're awkward with girls, or they don't explore themselves much, or they have social anxiety, or any combination of other reasons. And there's guys who are not that good looking who are in that category, either because they got into the right social circles, because they're really smooth and have a lot of charisma, or because they have status. So I think that the black pill, by solely focusing on looks, or primarily focus on looks, misses the bigger picture. Because if you look at like the guys, like if I walk around Miami, the guys that are walking around with the hottest girls, they're typically not giga chads. I mean, for sure, some of them are really good looking, but a lot of them, they look like your average guy, right? And it's like, so I look at that, and then sometimes you see some really, really good looking guys walking around with some like really unattractive girls. You see some famous guys walking around with unattractive girls. So yeah, I just like don't see that strong correlation between looks and the quality of your girlfriend just walking around the street.
Well, but the reality is that we have no idea about how they actually met. So a lot of it could be just beta boxing.
I think people like. Sure, I think to some extent some of those guys are where they are, but I think a lot of relationships quasi work that way. It's just a matter to which extent, where the guys like you can make the argument that anyone's beta boxing if you're like if you guys are living together and you pay the rent and she stays at home and like takes care of the house. You can make the argument that you're beta boxing, or there's levels to it, or maybe you give her an allowance, or maybe you're straight up like paying her like a sugar baby, or maybe you're literally paying her $1,000 every time you guys hang out. So there's like levels of beta boxing,
of course.
But to some extent, in most relationships, or in a lot of relationships, unless the woman is making a good amount of money, the guy is to some extent subsidizing her. Right, unless the girl is making a good amount of money herself, which like a lot of girls are not making as much money as like a guy who's like really high up. But there are some relationships where the girl makes a good amount of money.
Well, and that's changing massively, because the stats are showing that between age 20 and 29, that women are surpassing men as far as income nowadays. So, and that's kind of one of the pillars, the tenets of the black pill ideology is that, and I don't know where you stand on this, Alex. Honestly, I think you believe in hypergamy, but that's something that I want to speak for Emily, but we've spoken about that is that is a thing.
Depends on how you define hypergamy. How would you define it?
That women will only date across or above as far as SMV.
When you SMV, okay, you mean sexual market value.
Yes.
Does that include things like status and charisma, or just purely looks?
No, it includes everything.
Generally, yes, but there are quite a few exceptions. But generally, yes, I would agree that women will date across or up if we go by everything. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what I was saying. So, for example, if for some miracle some average guy gets together and has a relationship with a really attractive woman, there's got to be something else in place that's going on. Either he is like you and has 130K subs on YouTube, or he's doing really well financially and is essentially funding the relationship. That's what my argument would be.
People overblow the subs. Me having 130K subs doesn't really do much for my dating life. It doesn't it's not impressive, at least where I live. Yeah,
okay, maybe not, but for Destiny, for example, who's got 600, to me, I love the guy. I think he's great, but I think he's a little bit delusional about what the average guy goes through because of his. And the other thing, Alex, is that I bet if we looked at your demographics, it's almost mostly men on your channel. Where for Destiny, for example, it's 50-50.
Yeah, so
more. His is also primarily men.
Is it? Oh, he talks about getting DMs from women all the time.
He gets DMs from women, but his audience is 90% men. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
80-90%. Yeah, it's primarily dudes.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure, but I think there's also there's a good amount of right place, right time exceptions. I know my last 2 girlfriends ago, this chick that I was dating, she a good-looking girl, really hot Latina, and she showed me a picture of her ex-husband, who was really, really unattractive. And the story of how they met was basically she got out of a bad relationship. He was right place, right time, really good in bed apparently, and she just kind of fell in love with him slowly over time. So sometimes there's just right place, right time, right social circle, and then bonds start to form, and then logic goes out the window.
Yeah, I think that you make a really good point, and that kind of is a good lead-in to really how I think women feel when they meet somebody and what they use and kind of the thought process that they go through when determining if this is a guy that they really are interested in or not. So I think that women have 3 buckets. It's a yes, no, and then there's a very large maybe bucket.
I agree with that, yeah.
And I think that you have to some degree, you have to be attracted to him. So I think that is sort of the first thing, especially on dating apps and even on cold approach, I would say. That if you don't pass that threshold, I don't think you can't do anything really to convince her otherwise. And I think that if you do, if you really push her, that's dangerous territory, because I think that she could see you as coming off as really pushy, aggressive, even by using the word creep. I think that's where that word comes in. When girls say that they met some creepy guy, he probably wasn't doing anything different than a guy that was attractive would do in just trying to start conversation with her, but she wasn't attracted to him. And women are really bad at just shutting down a guy. I think most women are just really nice because there's a level of uncertainty, especially when you're a young woman. What's this guy want kind of thing? I don't want to make him mad. I don't want him to be upset. So, they just kind of go along with it. And then it's a whole mix up, because then that guy could even take her talking back to him as oh, she's maybe into me, and then he continues the conversation. So that's probably getting into another conversation of knowing somebody's body language, and really being aware
I actually
of that.
agree with everything you said. The one caveat I would give, this is where I disagree with the black pill, is I think that most guys will fall into the maybe bucket for some girls. You have to be particularly ugly or particularly unattractive not to be in the maybe bucket for every girl, right? Like if okay, so this is how I see it. If you're like really good looking guy, you will be either in the yes or maybe bucket for the vast majority of girls.
Yeah.
If you're an average guy, and most guys are average, right? Like it's guys who are like 2s and 3s are the exception to the rule. Like most people that like are average, right? That's what the word average means, is like you're the average person, right? 4, 5, 6, right? That's average, right? And that's like where the vast majority of men fall into. You're going to be in the maybe bucket you're going to be in the no bucket for some girls. You're going to be in the yes bucket for very few girls, but you're going to also be in the maybe bucket for a good amount of girls, right? She just might be attracted to some quality about you. It's like, oh, this guy's not particularly good looking, but I like his hair, or I like his eyes, or I like his style, or something like that. So yeah, that's why I think versus the black pill would make the argument that like, it's only like the Chads who are falling in the yes bucket, and everyone else is just like the Chad lights maybe get the maybe bucket, but the average guys in the no bucket for most girls. That's where I think I would disagree with the black pill.
So you think like one guy could be potentially in all 3 different buckets, just in different girls' buckets?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that I think it's pretty. Yeah, I think so. I mean, sure. Like if you're a really, really good looking guy, you're primarily going to be in the yes or maybe bucket. But there's still some girls who will put you in the no bucket. Like maybe she thinks you're too much of a pretty boy, and she had a bad experience with someone who was really good looking, and she thinks you're going to cheat on her. So you'll still theoretically be in the no bucket. If you're really, really repulsive, like sure, yeah, you're going to be in the no bucket for the vast majority of girls. But there will still be some girls who a small percentage of them, sure, you're gonna have to run higher volume, who you'll be in the maybe bucket for, and she'll be like, okay, this guy's not really attractive, but. And then the butt could be whatever it is that you have to offer.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I honestly, I would disagree with one point you made, is that, saying that most guys are average. There obviously is going to be an average, but I think the reality is that most guys are most women are not attracted to most guys now. Because if you look at the obesity rates in the United States, it's okay for a woman to be overweight, but for a guy to be overweight, that just kills his chances most of the time. Women are not attracted to overweight guys, and there's a lot of overweight guys. And especially in the younger generation, because as a psychotherapist, I've worked with hundreds of guys who kind of fit in this category. A lot of them have no idea about looks maxing at all. A lot of them don't even know how to shower on a regular basis. So I think I think there's a lot of guys out there that just, the things that you would talk about and we would talk about are just completely clueless to. We talked to a guy yesterday when we were prepping for this who hadn't even heard of the manosphere. So I think that, the reality is that guys really need to level up. And I think we're both, kind of preaching that same message.
I would just fundamentally disagree with a big part of that. The idea that like an overweight guy is going to have that is more acceptable for a guy, there's less acceptable for a guy to be overweight. An overweight girl will do way better than the average guy.
No, I agree with that. That's what I was saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, so for the, overweight girl can like totally crush online dating, right? Still versus, right. Okay. So
my point is saying that it's acceptable for women to be overweight, that guys will go down that route, but women won't go down that route with the overweight guys.
So overweight guys don't have a chance as much as an overweight woman.
Yes.
Unless they're like rich or have high status. Yeah, I would agree with that, generally speaking. But okay, but if you say that most guys aren't average, then what category do they fall into?
Well, I mean, there's always going to be an average, right? It's just, I think what the average is that, if you looked at some of the studies about how women view men, the guys aren't cutting it. So whatever the average is, it's below what a lot of women would find attractive. At least that's self-reported.
Okay, we're talking about looks right now, or overall picture?
Mostly, well, like for that OkCupid study that said, women believe that 80% of men are below average. So, I would assume that would be mostly based on looks, but, the reality is that it could be, total SMV as well. But the reality is that the average guy probably makes like $40,000 a year.
Yeah, so where's he compensating?
Well, you can compensate in many different ways. You can compensate through really good charisma. You can compensate through, for example, having social connections. I mean, there's many different ways, through being really funny. There's many different forms of like ways you can kind of equalize the balance. But I would say like by default, the average guy is average, right? Like the average guy is like a 5.5 in terms of looks. In terms of personality qualities, he might be below average. Like the average guy is probably more socially awkward than the girls would like. He's probably shyer, more timid than most girls would like. Sure, I can accept all that. But in terms of looks, like the average guy isn't a 3. Like the average guy is like a 5. And then guys who are like outliers, like really ugly, really attractive, are by default outliers, right? That's just like basic statistics.
I think that women's opinion on like what they think is an average looking guy can definitely be skewed. You know, it's almost like the average income earner, you know, like that's really skewed. We know that.
We know the thing that we've talked about all the time until we actually got on the same page was what a dad bod is. And so
we've talked a lot about that.
Yeah. So what a dad bod is from a guy's perspective is going to be much different than what a typical woman would think a dad bod is.
Right. And that's very subjective. Whereas, like, I feel like looks, you know, if you're rating it on that scale, and obviously income, that's a little bit more objective, you know. But as far as the dad bod thing, it depends on your view of what a dad bod is and what your definition is. And I think that a woman's definition of a dad bod is very different from a man's definition of a dad bod. I've seen it over and over.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we've gotten to the heart of the disagreement. Not the disagreement, but the confusion.
Yeah.
Okay, so I agree with you that women's perception of what is average could be skewed.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the reality that the average guy is average if we're being objective. But yes, I could agree with you that a woman's perception, so the average guy is a 5, but a girl might think that the average guy looks like a 6.5 or something.
Yes, like exactly.
Yeah, I think that is.
Okay. Yeah. So then we actually agree. We're just talking about slightly different things. Yeah, I agree with you that the girl's perception is probably going to be skewed due to just all the media that she consumes, right? Because it's like typically it's not the average guy that's pushed to the top of the list on Instagram, nor the average girl. It's typically like the better looking people get pushed higher, so then your perception of what is average, you know, goes out the window. I mean, I remember like when I was in like high school, like, you know, like what I thought was like the average girl and the hot girl is like nowadays I would look at just living in Miami and like in 2023, I would think is like average at best, if not below average. Like the hot girl in my high school, I would say is like, to me, looks average now. But back in those days, I would have thought that was like the hottest chick ever. And like, oh my God, if I could just get close to her. But now I'd be like, oh, she's okay, I guess. I don't know. Like,
yeah. Well, so, you make a valid point, and that's so pervasive. It's not only on social media. It's in, you know, movies. It's in TV shows. Yeah. It's artists. You know, except some of those are exceptions, of course. But you know, typically any leading man in a show or a movie is going to be a Chad.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and especially if you're younger, the TikTok guys that are going to come across your screen are going to be, you know, all those Chads as well. So you have the combination of that, and then the other the other factor that is involved is that there's a lot of entitled women out there nowadays because of the fact that they get so many matches, and also their friends prop them up all the time, even if they're below average. And so how many women have you've heard say, I'm a 10, and they're really a 3?
Sure, I agree with that. Yeah, guys' ability to rate themselves is way more accurate than women's. Sure, like most girls significantly overrate themselves to like an insanely comical degree, versus more guys. Most guys actually underrate themselves or like equal, right? Like I think guys are way more modest when it comes to their self-perception. Yes, I do think that has to do with like the kind of experience you get from the outside world, right? If you're like a below average girl objectively, but like you're getting treated like a 10, you're going to probably think you're a 10, right? And then you're going to delude yourself. So yeah, I do agree all of that is an issue. And we probably do agree on the solution. That's to level up as a man. But then it's kind of like, there's two ways to look at it. You could look at it from a macro or micro perspective. From a macro perspective, it's like if more guys keep leveling up, then the standard just keeps going higher and higher and higher, and then it just becomes more of a constant rat race, right? From a macro perspective, that like is kind of like not really the best solution. But from a micro perspective, that's really the only solution, because you can't control the macro, you can't control society's standards of what the average woman thinks. All you can do is control what you do. So your only choice is to level up. So it's kind of like a little bit of a catch-22.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
we're in the same place as that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that really needs to happen, but probably won't in the near future, is women to be more realistic as far as where they are.
What they
But
can
that won't
expect.
happen, right?
too.
Because that's a macro solution.
Yeah, I
There's no way
understand.
to.
But
Yeah.
and exactly. But it's something too that, and you know, this is kind of where thirstiness and simps comes in. Is, you know, I think the message has to be sent that, you know, guys have to, you know, stop doing this, especially, you know, to women, or I would say to any woman, you know, to put her on a pedestal. That's just weak behavior in my perspective. But, you know, that's another problem that's probably not going to go away anytime soon, no matter how much we all preach it.
The only way to like really like even have a role in that would be for the government to come in and like make anti-simping laws where like if you get caught simping, you go to jail for 10 years. Like, if the government does that, then yeah, we could probably make a difference. But
I know.
No government is going to do that. Like
Yeah.
anti-simping laws, like 10 years in jail for the first simping offense, lifetime for the second, death penalty for the third.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you on death row for? Oh,
But
you
you
know, I
don't-
just to this chick's DMs and I triple text her.
It's only going to increase too, because I think that has increased because of social media.
Because of the artificial inflation, because as more guys simp, then the standard keeps going up.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's only going to get worse.
And I
So all
mean,
you can-
we were just talking about how there's women even simping for guys on TikTok.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know,
top
Matt
1%.
Rife, the comedian on TikTok. Oh, he's been blowing up, and he's very attractive, and he's young and very funny. And if you go into any of his comment section, it's just women simping over him. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So maybe they just need to equalize. More women need to simp.
I think
The reason women won't simp is because they're only really attracted to the Matt Rifes of the world.
Well, right. It'll only be a select few guys.
Well, no, but I
Exactly.
think
They
someone
would
like
be.
Leonardo DiCaprio could destroy this Matt Rife character that I know nothing about.
Not
Like,
current Leonardo DiCaprio.
with his, because I think that above average looking guy with massive, like
he's got
highest level of
massive-
status.
Yeah,
will
Leonardo,
crush a really good looking guy with minimal status.
yeah, sure. But there's only one Leonardo DiCaprio in the world, and so we're talking about 0.0001% of guys who are average looking but have that kind of status.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Leonardo DiCaprio, I would say, is above average looking, right? Probably.
At this point, I would say he's a normie for sure.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, when he was young, he was definitely a Chad, but he's almost 50 years old, and
He looks pretty good for his age. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, he does compared to most 50-year-olds. But if
That's
he didn't,
true.
but if he didn't have that status, if he was just a normal 50-year-old, and he worked construction or something, you know,
different. Well, I think
it'd be a lot
status, status is like a hell of a drug. Like I think that, yeah, like I would always put my money on an older guy with insane status over like a young, really good looking guy. Just an ability to compete in the dating marketplace. But also, if you think about it, like most like leading actors, I don't think they're like giga chads. I think they're more like decent looking, good looking guys who are like 6s and 7s. Because I think for like big movie production companies to cast like as the main role as a giga chad, which does happen sometimes, but to constantly do it is like could discourage the average person from watching it. So I think they would want to cast someone who's like more attainable, where it's like, I could potentially, if I do everything right. Well, like give me like counter examples.
I'll disagree because look at, as much as I can't stand these films, but look at the whole Marvel universe.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Captain America. Like they're all, you know, giga chads.
Well, those are superhero movies. They have to cast. That's a little bit of an exception.
Yeah, but the reality is that that's what people are going to watch. I mean, one of those Marvel cinematic Avengers movies, I think was like one of the highest grossing movies of all times. Like that's what people are watching. Even like the new Batman movie that came out. Yeah, you know, it's Robert Pattinson. He's definitely, you know, in that 1% Chad category. Mm-hmm. You know, I would say that, you know, for most TV and film roles, and think about what they cast as the villain. The villain is always some guy, especially like in James Bond films, that has a scar or you know,
or skinny, scrawny.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Versus Bond is always, you know, the Giga Chad.
Yeah.
You even said yourself, Alex, when we were talking before that like he's the ideal, right? As far as like body composition.
But I think we can't like looking at superhero movies. Of course, for superhero movies, they're going to cast the best looking guy because that's like the best chance that he's going to be like a superhero, right? But if we look at like like the most popular, like actually TV shows, right? They're typically not like the Giga Chad. They're just a good looking guy, like 24, Seinfeld, Friends, Frasier, Game of Thrones, right? Like none of these contain Giga Chads. They contain like average to above average looking guys, right? Like the most popular TV shows of all times. Like I'm looking at this, the 100 most watched TV shows of all time. I got the list on IMDb. The first one is Game of Thrones, right? That one, you can maybe make the argument that Jamie Lannister is like a Chad, but that's about it. Stranger Things, I don't know. The Walking Dead, I don't believe The Walking Dead contains any like Giga Chads. Yeah, I mean, like most of the Grey's Anatomy, again, like above average looking guys.
Those guys
like,
are all Chads.
Yeah,
Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy. Yeah.
Do you think those are all Giga Chads on the Grey's Anatomy?
The main one. The what's his name?
Patrick Dempsey. I think his name is
Patrick Dempsey. He's definitely a Chad.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, we're debating about semantics though, as far as like how much does this really impact women's standards? I would say that it's especially for younger women, it's really going to be more social media like the TikTok, and I think what's going to be coming through their FYPs is going to be mostly it's going to be really attractive guys, or it's going to be guys who are really funny, or at the or unattractive guys.
Yeah, because I think movies and like TikTok, very different, right? Movies, you need to have a certain level of talent.
Yeah, I agree
and
with
so
that.
it's hard to find somebody that has a very specific look. If you're trying to find the most attractive guy, he may not be as talented as the guy that's a little bit less attractive. But on TikTok, like it's so easy to make a short clip where you're not even talking and you're just staring into the camera as a guy. And, if you're really attractive, that can really take off. And I think that we've been seeing that over the last 5-10 years. And so more women are seeing these types of men, just like in reverse, just like it's always been with models, female models that men are looking at. And then, it just skews their opinion of what normal is.
Yeah. Well, I would say probably
I do agree with that. Yeah, I think there's a massive I do agree that there's a difference between Hollywood and TikTok.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes back to what I always say, which is I think TikTok is like a fucking poison on society. And
yeah, a lot of people will argue that.
I think like it's pretty clear that like TikTok is controlled by the CCP, and that like their whole point is just to make Westerners as dumb as possible.
Yeah, we're not going to disagree with that for sure.
Yeah,
I know, even as a TikToker here.
Yeah.
I will not disagree. Like, it really does depend on the content that you consume and how the algorithm kind of figures you out and what kind of content that you like. But I think for like Gen Z, they are being fed like junk.
Yeah.
Absolute
no,
junk.
I agree. I mean, I heard that in China, like TikTok algorithm is like totally different. Instead of promoting like pretty girls, it shows like educational content. I've had like a few people who I know who are Chinese confirm that it's like totally different algorithm. Like, so yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
That, I personally don't consume anything on TikTok. I just post content on there, but
Yeah.
I don't like that app too much.
Yeah.
Like
The thing about the way it works so well is that it clocks it by watch time. And so if you're a guy and, a total 10 comes on the screen and is, jumping up and down, and it's one of those things where it's difficult not to look. And then all of a sudden that ends up happening because, like, for example, for our TikTok page, Emily and I are both on that. But just for the hell of it, I decided to go on the FYP of that page. And the first thing that got shown, because probably they saw a guy's name in it,
right,
was, one of these women. So they lead with that type of thing. And that's how they try to get you hooked. So I think that
you can end up watching it but not liking it, but they pay more attention to your watch time. So you're going to get, inundated with a ton of videos just like that one if you've watched the whole thing.
Would you agree that like if you guys both just started your own separate TikToks from scratch, that Emily would have a much easier road to getting to 1 million subs than you, Todd, just because she's female?
Not because she's female. First is that she's young and attractive, and she's super talented. So that she would, mod me there.
I'm just assuming for argument's sake that you guys have the same level of talent, same level of charisma, same level of everything, right? And like, sure, Emily's pretty, right? But like, there is also like just the fact that she's a female, and that by default more people will watch her just because she's a female, and that will push her average watch time. And so, like, yeah, I do think I
don't know, because Emily is very modest on camera, and so like she doesn't lead with her sexuality at all. And so if you're saying I had the exact amount of talent that Emily did, I think that it might not be that much of a difference.
Yeah, because in my case, like my looks, I'm not leading with that necessarily or relying on that as much.
Well, you can be very modest, right? Like, for example, like Courtney Ryan is also very modest.
She's
right?
not modest.
Courtney?
She shows her cleavage every damn video. And the camera's set like right below where her cleavage is. She's leading with her looks for sure.
I mean, to some extent, but she's not like she's like always wearing like pretty like conservative clothing from what I've seen.
I don't know. How do you feel about that, Emily?
Yeah, so my opinion is that she is showing a lot of cleavage.
But then
I
do you
think
as
that
a girl, where you do like what you have to wear like a straitjacket or something, so no one can, what will be the alternative to that?
No, she just wears what she's wearing now, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of what you would wear.
That's kind of what Courtney wears too. Like what Emily's wearing.
No way. Oh, no way.
I don't know. Like,
look at her videos.
I don't know. This can be very subjective too, right? Because like for me individually, I just wear what I normally wear out. Like if I would wear in my videos what I wear to the grocery store. So for me, like if I was wearing a low cut, in one of my videos, that's actually very unnatural for me. I wouldn't be wearing that out. So that's where it's like, if I were to do that, I am definitely individually leading with my sexuality, right? Because there's that divide of what I normally wear versus what I'm purposely wearing to get attention. So
I think part of that could be climate, though, because you are from like much more north. You're from a place where it's almost always cold, right?
No, it gets into the 80s here in the summer. It gets
half
warm.
And half.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that like I show my stomach in many of my videos, like during the summertime in short shorts. Like it's not like I'm in a straitjacket, but that's all stuff that I would normally wear out. So somebody might look at my videos that is really modest, and they might say the same thing about me. They might say that, oh, she's leading with her sexuality, but I'm not really, because I'm just comfortable in that. So if Courtney is like comfortable in that, and she wears that in everyday life, then I think the argument could be made that is just her, and that she's not
I'm
leading.
Speculating because I don't know her that well, but I would probably, if I had to bet my money, I would definitely bet that that's like what she wears. Just from like the communication, what I know about her is that like that's what she wears in like her day-to-day life. Like there are definitely some like female content creators who do a lot of thirst traps, right? Like they never mention that they have a boyfriend. They kind of lead guys on to think that like, oh, you might have a chance with me. Like I definitely know a lot of female content creators do that. But I feel like Courtney's pretty upfront about the fact that she has a boyfriend, that she's not going to hook up with any of these guys, that sort of thing.
But how do you feel about Kezia Noble, for example?
She leads with her looks for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, she understands that her breasts will get her way more views, right? I mean, I think she's a good content creator. I like her as a person.
I wasn't asking about her content creation. I was just asking about, do you think that she leads with her looks?
Modest. She's less modest than Courtney, I will say that for sure.
Okay, yeah. And so I think there's definitely different levels to this. So I would say she's the highest, Courtney would be in the middle, and then Emily would be the bottom as far as leading with sexuality, for sure.
Well, I think in order to really get to the bottom of this, we got to put like an ugly mask and a fat suit on Emily, and then we can really make sure she's not leading with her sexuality. Yeah. So let's get like a 500-pound fat suit on you, and we can really be sure about this.
If she was making content for women, then it probably wouldn't be an issue.
I'd probably get more women subscribers.
Yeah, but if it's something if it's for men, I don't know, so because the reality is that that woman, I keep forgetting her name, Drew whatever.
Drew, right. My favorite content creator.
Yeah, she's overweight and just she's the definition of trashy to me. And she's got huge numbers of female, if there's any guys that are, following her, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Sure, I kind of get that. What are your analytics, Emily? What percentage of the channel is male to women? I would speculate that you're like 90% men for your channel.
You hit it dead on. It varies a little bit. Like I've gone through periods where it's 85% men, but I just checked yesterday and it's at 90 right now for men, and then 10% women.
Yeah.
So like I would be in denial to say that like there's probably some men that have followed me simply because of how I look, you know, and especially with how TikTok works, you can just easily follow after watching one video and without even seeing somebody's page, you know, and to see what they're all about. You can just decide, ooh, like she's attractive, I'm going to follow her. That definitely happens. So I would be crazy to say that there's none of my followers that have followed me just for that. But
I also don't think it has to be like black and white where it's either like you're following someone for looks or talent. I think it's typically more like kind of in the center where it's like maybe like someone watches your video a few seconds longer because they're hoping that maybe you will like show something, but then you don't, but then they wind up like staying on the video for a few seconds longer anyway. And then like that pushes you up in the algorithm and that creates like a chain reaction. And then like maybe some of them like your content, some of them don't. So I feel like it's typically not like black and white where it's just like, I'm just following this girl because she's hot or I'm just following this. I think sometimes it's like a little bit of a combination of things.
I agree. I think the majority of followers, it's because of both, you know, potentially.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that there's a lot of women on there that are only being followed because of the way that they look.
Yes, for sure.
And same thing with guys.
Yeah.
Because you have talent as well, and you put really good content out there, and you do a lot of validation for men about their struggles, and you know you're like probably the number one person in that space for females to males on all of TikTok.
Oh, I don't know about that. You think I'm the number one person?
No, Emily's the number one person on TikTok as far as having a male audience as far as being a female creator.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know
I would say like within the content that I do.
Within the content, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because there was really no one even before me getting started, other than like maybe one. She has, I forget her name, but she has like a ton of tattoos. But her style is very different, and she's more like harsh, and she bashes women. So she kind of does like the opposite of what you see Drew do, where she bashes men because of, you know, what a man has said about a woman.
Yeah, you've probably seen her, Alex. She's got neck tattoos. That's what you're referring to, right? Too.
I forget her name.
And she is I don't know, maybe if this is a live chat, someone could know what her name is. But she kind of doubles down because she advocates for men, but she also trashes women simultaneously. Right. Where, I mean, you do a little bit of trashing of women, of their bad behaviors.
I push on their bad behavior, never attack their looks. Like, I just think that there's areas that you don't go into, and I'm going to attack what they're doing to somebody else because I don't believe in that is right. You know, like that's a poor argument for your behavior. So I will definitely dig in, like with some of my stitches in that aspect. But
someone said it's Roma Army.
Roma Army, that's what it is. Okay. Yeah, she used to get tagged in my stuff quite often because, like, when I first got started, I think her audience came over to me and started following me, so they were like tagging her. So that's when I found out about her. But other than that, like, there was no one really before me that did.
But there's been a lot of people after you.
But a lot of people after, for sure. Yeah, like
what do you think about the concept of like a pick-me girl? You know what that is? Like,
oh my gosh, do I know what that is? I get that thrown at me all the time.
So yeah, like I've heard people make that argument about Pearl. That like the reason she rose. I'm not making this argument, by the way. I've heard this argument, and my girlfriend actually makes this argument. Is that the reason she rose to such prominence is because she was telling guys exactly what they want to hear. Right, and that like, you know, it's like, yeah, finally a woman who completely takes her side. And I guess Drew's like the opposite of that. She's like a pick-me guy or whatever the fuck. I don't know whatever the fuck you want to call the opposite of a pick-me girl.
Right.
Actually, I don't think there's a term for that, but yeah, you get the point.
Yeah, probably not.
How much do you think that can play a role in like boosting you up in the algorithm, just kind of telling people what they want to hear?
Yeah,
I feel like that's a huge role, in my opinion.
It can. I can see that. But I think that you still need to come off as genuine. I think that people in the audience are really good at being able to depict when you are not. Because I've had people, so they're almost more like copycats after me, where they've seen some of my content and they're a woman that are like fairly attractive, and they will almost verbatim, without using my sound, they will say like the same things as me. And you can just, like, me personally, I can tell that they're copying me and they're not being genuine. But then I'll go to the comments and a lot of people are calling her out because they can read with her body language that she's not being genuine. And plus, some of them have already heard what I've said. And so they know that she's just copying. So I think that that can definitely be a situation where that woman is, just being quote unquote a pickme. They're just trying to say the things that they know that men want to hear just so that they get the follow or the likes.
They're just pandering.
They're pandering, yeah. Like, I definitely think that happens. But when you have, like, an original idea, that, like, a guy, say he comes across my video and it's a very different opinion, and I don't think that I pander to men. I think that I try to show both sides of a situation many times. And
but you're also mostly so this is, I think, we should talk about real quickly is that you're more in the dating space on TikTok or relationship, I should say.
Yes.
And we're on our podcast, we're more talking about dating.
That is very true.
So
yes.
It's
what's the difference?
About people in relationships.
Yeah, so like the issues that people come across in relationships with communication errors, or like what a man desires versus what a woman desires, and what what they both need versus when we talk on the podcast, it is like advice to men on what they can do, based on XYZ, what women want and how.
Different terminology.
It's a little bit different.
So I would say dating would it be pre-relationship. Or if, the guy is into hookup culture, that type of thing, which I know you, focus a lot of your attention on as well. But dating would be, to relationships. And, kind of, so on her TikTok, she's going to be mostly talking about the dynamics between men and women who are kind of already either have gone out, at least on one or two dates probably, or are kind of in relationships, not kind of the getting in the door stage. That's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Okay.
And the other thing that like I talk about, because I'm just thinking since you mentioned Pearl, and this has come about because she actually had some viral TikToks just go viral recently. And she's talking about cheating and like why men cheat on their woman. And that's a topic that I've covered quite often on my TikTok. And I think that Pearl might be pandering, because I don't think she has enough experience personally to really speak to that issue, or has worked with people that have been in relationships in which that happens. Because I think that she makes a really good points when it comes to dating, but I just don't think, based on like the way that she talks about that men cheat basically because of his woman not doing XYZ. Like, I think that's telling that she's not really fully aware of what goes into a relationship and what causes that type of situation.
Yeah, I don't even know if Pearl's been in a relationship.
And that's what everyone's attacking her for, right? Is that like she doesn't really know.
In general, view relationships as like too transactional. So do black pillars to some extent, but definitely red pillars. Like, they view it as like they take all the emotion and the humanity out of a relationship and just look at it as like a logical transaction, which it seldom ever is. Relationships are logical transactions.
You make a really good point, because I think that is what she's doing. She has also bashed women for not leaving immediately after her man cheats, like instantly. And if you've ever been in a relationship, like whatever comes up and you're talking about ending the relationship, it's very difficult to end it immediately, and I would argue against that not being healthy anyways.
Yeah, it's like I come from like a pickup background, so it's like in the pickup, one of the first things you learn is attraction is emotional, not logical, which is like always funny to me to watch like Fresh and Fit and like red pillars who view it in a very logical way. It seems like their strategy is literally to like show up on a date and give the girl 5 logical reasons why they should have sex with them, and it's like attraction doesn't work that way, right? You can be like make a lot of money, but if you go up to a girl and you're like, hey, I make a lot of money, that's actually going to work against you, or at the very best be neutral. So yeah, it's like kind of funny to watch that, but yeah, like I do think that the red pillars really take the human element out of it, and you can't ignore that even if you want to, because again, like relationships are typically emotional. Like a lot of relationships aren't these perfect transactions of value where like you're doing 50 and I'm doing 50. Like a lot of times there's an emotional element, there's a dependency element, there's like love makes you do things that you might not do logically. There's all these other factors that go into the photo that in the picture that like red pillars just completely forget about.
Well, the other thing that red pillars don't really focus on at all is relationships in general. And so that's one of the issues I have with the red pill community is the fact that they're really just focused more on getting laid or, short-term hookups, relationships, that type of thing, versus, trying to get and attain a long-term relationship with somebody that, you have a potential future with. I don't hear a lot of that messaging coming from the red pill.
I think red pill have two different categories. One is hookups, casual sex, where it's just like about getting your nut, and then the second one is like basically like having kids, right? It's like and that for a girl like that, she needs to kind of stay quiet, don't talk too much, just be in the kitchen, cook, clean, fuck whenever you want, raise the kids, and that's like that's it. And that's like it's also in a very so both of them are very logical. They never talk about like, okay, well, like how much of a connection should you have with your wife?
Mm-hmm.
How do you talk about communication? How do you guys make sure that both of your needs are being met? That's like never something you see addressed in the red pill community. It's always like, okay, find a woman who's a virgin or very low body count, who knows how to cook and clean. It's always very logical reasons. It's never but like, and sure, sometimes the logical stuff is important, but it's like they completely forget about the emotional stuff, and that's why typically very few red pillars are actually in like solid relationships. Most of them are just like single. Some of them have been single their whole life. Some of them have never been in relationships, right? I think we all know who I'm talking about.
Well, they're also trying to turn back the clock, right? As far as, kind of how men typically viewed women in a different era. And, that's not changing. So women, are going to continue to progress. They're not going to be super submissive and in the kitchen and barefoot and pregnant. Those
Right.
days are gone. And so it's really about, kind of evaluating what's going on right now and then how to navigate it from there. So, for example, having more of a 50-50 partnership and, trying to have good communication skills so that you can, when you're in that relationship, define those roles pretty clearly versus making assumptions.
Yeah. I think that's a good lead in to, going back to the 3 bucket thing. I think that the generation that woman is in, it really varies the buckets or the level of importance within each bucket, right? So
Sure,
I think
agree.
that for Gen Z women that are doing pretty well, where they've gone to college and they have their own career, I would argue that money, like the amount of money that man is making, is less important than somebody of the millennial generation or above, boomers, whatever. I think that the older generations consider that as a higher importance. And so I think that the mix-up that can sometimes happen with advice that's being given to men is that, like, that's not being taken into account. And what matters for many young women now, what matters is, like, being capable of that 50-50, right? And having more balanced life and being really emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, no, I do think there's definitely generational component. Like I look at it like between like me and my parents, and like I don't know, what would you call like someone who's like my parents? Would that be a boomer, or there's another one?
Baby boomer, right?
Yeah, they would probably be boomers. Yeah, there's boomers, Gen X. That'd be like my category. Then there's millennials, which would be you guys, and then obviously someone in their 20s would be Gen Z.
I think my parents would be somewhere between a boomer and Generation X. But anyway, like, yeah, there's definitely a generational thing where, like, I think, like, someone like my mom would, like, look much more for, like, stability, intelligence, rather than, like I look at her, like, boyfriend/fiance. He's not a good-looking dude at all. Like, like, I've asked her, like, hey, like, just out of curiosity, like, you could probably do better. She's like, yeah, I just like he's very stable, he's reliable, he's responsible, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Although sometimes, like, even that is called into question. But versus, like, I feel like for younger girls, she probably will prioritize looks more and stuff like that and external things. So yeah, I do think there's a generational component.
Yeah.
But my mom did not grow up with like Instagram, TikTok, and all that stuff. So it's very different. I also think there's like, in terms of like promiscuity, there's a big generational gap. Like people in my mom's generation, I mean, sure, there were some women who slept around in that generation, but there were like a small percentage of women who had like a body count of double digits versus like nowadays it is like way, way more common. Like I know that like my mom's like, she's like, I don't understand. Like, how are these girls like sleeping around? Like, don't they like, like we didn't do that back in the day. So I do think there's like a lot of different generational things that have changed. Yeah. And you do have to account for that because you can't like live in the past. It's like a business who doesn't do any social media marketing. It's like, okay, but like that's where the future is.
Yeah, exactly. And so those people are who are in their 20s now or teenagers. They've grown up in that, and that's not going away. So it's just going to continue. So what will end up happening is that the older people will die off, and this will be the new normal.
Yeah.
Hookup culture.
Well, let me. I guess like this is a good question. I think to end it off on. What do you think? Where do you see the future of dating 10, 20 years from now?
10, 20 years from now? I mean, I do think that it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think that the turn of it will probably when dating apps are better, and when there's like a better algorithm. I think that might turn the tide. But I do think that dating apps are here to stay, even though they're not working very well. And I think that there's just this imbalance right now where young women are wanting more of that 50-50 guy. And I think that like guys are trying to adjust to that. And I do think that Gen Z guys are doing a better job at, being capable of that. But I just think that women do have so many options right now on the dating apps that it's almost like option overload. And they're just being so picky that it's hard. It's hard to settle and like be happy with a choice when you know that it's so easily, even to just end a relationship.
Well, if you have infinite amount of choices in their mind, whether that's true or not, if you find a quality in that person that you don't like,
right,
then it's very easy to say, oh, I'll just go on Tinder and go on 5 dates that week.
It is.
And monkey branch to somebody else.
Yeah, because you can't deny that, like, just thinking that if you end a relationship with somebody, that it's going to be difficult to find somebody else, like that will hold you back. And I don't see that really as necessarily a bad thing, because I think that relationships are difficult and you're going to run into those times in which like you need to sit and be uncomfortable and maybe not have the best of times, but you work through it. And if you have that easy out, it's harder for you to do that. And even though I mentioned dating apps, I actually think that hookup culture in general right now is the leading cause of it getting worse.
I think I agree that like more choices isn't always better. There's like a legit phenomenon that cures called buyer's fatigue. When you have too many options, you just wind up like getting nothing, right? Because you can't make a decision. But I don't think it's going to get better ever. I think it's just going to get worse and worse, is my opinion. I just cannot imagine it getting better for most guys. For some guys, it will be better than ever. So it's not. There's. I think it's going to be like most things. I think it's like dating is going to be like money, which is kind of my prediction. Where it's like there's going to be a small people at the top who like have more than they've ever had in any point in history, right? And then there's going to be less for everyone at the bottom, because there's finite amount of resources, finite amount of food, finite amount of women, finite amount of whatever, attention, cloud, whatever you want to call it. So I don't think it's going to get better for the average guy, is my prediction. Yeah,
that sounds kind of black pillish though, Alex.
Not real, because again, here's the difference though, is that I don't think it has to do with primarily has to do with looks. I think it's way more complex than just looks. And number two is that I think that the average guy can still, from a micro perspective, because now I'm talking from a macro perspective, from a micro perspective, most guys can succeed. Okay, I don't know how to explain. Like, okay, from a macro perspective, most guys cannot succeed, because if most guys are succeeding, then the bar goes higher, right? But from a micro perspective, right, as a person, you can succeed. Every guy watching this channel, or most guys watching this channel, can do better. So I think it just depends if you look at it from a macro or micro perspective. I always give advice from a micro perspective, because I have no control over the macro. I'm not like the fucking world leader or something like that. Even if I was, I probably couldn't change like global trends or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe that kind of clear.
I can see your point in that way. I just think that it's going to get better when Gen Z starts having children, and I know that's fewer than other generations, but I think that that's going to be the change in tide when it comes to hookup culture. Like, I really think that that's going to die out, and we're going to have a resurgence of whatever the opposite is you'd call hookup culture. And I think that there's going to be then more connections made that are long-term, and women are not going to be with as many men, and they're going to pair bond better. And I think that's where dating is going to become easier for the average guy.
I think I
hope you're right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're wrong.
I actually agree with Alex on that one. Unless we have a huge resurgence in monogamy, and that ends up being a real pillar of our culture as far as saying, because, it used to be, even 30 years ago, it was something where that was highly valued. And hookup culture, especially for women, that was pretty much taboo. If they did it, they would never talk about it. But now they're going on podcasts and they're having TikToks and they're rating guys about how good in bed they were.
Well, I don't think that they've had reality set in yet, right? So I think that it's going to take time.
The only way there could be like there could be the resurgence of what you're describing if there's like some kind of big disaster. There's a comet, there's a famine, meaning like society comes close to collapsing. The government has to take a very heavy hand and has to start really pushing like, hey, listen, the human population is going to collapse in a decade if we don't replicate. So we need to really go like Soviet Union style and like push like monogamy onto people. But that's not going to happen if things are going well. That can only happen if there's a massive disaster. So I do think that like if there's some kind of big disaster, which there could be, but I don't think there probably will be, that yes, we could have a total change in culture. But without that kind of like external event, I don't think that it's going to happen naturally on its own. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think that the other reason that I would point to is that in general, I don't think that women get much satisfaction from participating in hookup culture long term. And I think that those women, as they age and they have children of their own, they are going to be teaching those children something different than what I didn't see that pop up.
They're going to be. Trump must win the 2024 election. That's
that's the catastrophe. So I think that might change everything, is what the children are being taught. And I know that there's less children being born, but that's the other part, is that are the people that are participating in hookup culture that don't end up in relationships, they're probably having less children. So their morals are not going to be passed down to the next generation. It's going to be like a natural selection. They'll be weeded out. Whereas the families, the ones that have a family unit, family structure, they're going to pass down those morals. And whether or not they ever participated as parents themselves in hookup culture, that's debatable. But I think either way, if they participated, they can probably look back and say, that did not help me. That did not help my mental state. It was not good for me. I'm going to teach my children to do different than me and do better than me, because we see that in many aspects of life. And then I think that for the parents that never participated, obviously, there's probably some morals that they have that they would also pass down to their children.
I would consider them more values than morals. But,
true.
I would say that to piggyback on that I don't think that for men it's healthy either, as far as long term. And it's something that I think that if you're young and you kind of go through that phase, I think it gets old. It's almost kind of like when you're young and you go to the club for the first time. It's really fun and exciting. And then by the time you hit 25, it's
not as fun.
It's not that fun. It loses its luster kind of.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's close it out. Do you guys want to plug your channel, your TikTok, your YouTube, your podcast?
Yes. So across the board, TikTok and YouTube, you can find us at the Emily and Todd podcast. And then me individually also on TikTok is Emily W. King.
And you can check out the episode I did on Emily Todd podcast. It was a really good one. We went for like 2 hours on that one. It was a good discussion. But thank you both for coming on. I think it was fun. Wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be, right, Emily?
No, not bad at all. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Appreciate you. Have a good one. Take care.
You too.
Take care, guys.
Bye.